Good afternoon, everyone. We are the last group that are going to report, and we will discuss Chapter 19 about organizational change and stress management. I am Giselle Flores, and I am going to discuss about organizational change and the Levin's three-step model. Change is making things different. Change is already part of our life, as we all know that it is the most constant in this world. Change is just inevitable for companies as it is for individuals, and each company will have its own way of responding to current changes and strategizing future changes. And that is the topic that I am gonna discuss. I will discuss what are the changes in an organization and how the company cope up with it. Organizational change. It refers to a modification or transformation of the organization's structure, processes, or goods. And it is defined as change that has an impact on the way work is performed and has significant effects on staff. Organizational change is a transformation or adjustment to the way an organization functions. Organizations adjust to small changes all the time, possibly looking to improve productivity, responding to a new regulation, hiring a new employees, or something similar. But on top of this, little adjustments we make at work all the time. There are larger pressures that loom over us, like competition, technology, or customer demands. Those larger pressures sometimes require larger responses. There are two types of change: forces for change and planned change. Forces for change includes changing the nature of the workforce, technology, economic shocks, competition, social trends, and world politics. Changing nature of the workforce, there are changes in these are changes in multicultural environment, demographic, immigration, and outsourcing. For example, in demographics, there is a rapid increase of percentage of women employees, meaning more dual career couples. Organizations have to modify transfer and promotion policies as well as make child care and elder care available in order to respond the needs of two career couple. Number two, technology. Rapid technological innovation is a major force for change in organizations, and those who fail to keep pace can quickly fall behind. The adaptation of new technology, such as computers, telecommunications systems, and flexible manufacturing operations, have profound impact on the organizations that adopt them. Number three, economic shocks. An economic shock refers to any change to fundamental macroeconomic variables or relationship that has a substantial effect on macroeconomic outcomes and measure of economic performance such as unemployment, consumption, and inflation. Shocks are Economic shocks are often unpredictable and are usually the result of events thought to be beyond the normal scope of economic transactions. Number four, competition. Marketing conditions are no more static. They are in the process of rapid change as the needs, desire, and expectation of customers change rapidly and frequently. Moreover, there is a tough competition in the market as the market is flooded with new products and innovations every day. Number five, social trends. There are a lot of social changes due to spread of education, knowledge, and a lot of government efforts. Social equality, equal opportunities to women, equal pay for equal work has posed new challenges for the management. The management has to follow certain social norms in shaping its employment, marketing, and other policies. And last, world politics. The interference of the government in business has increased tremendously in most of the countries. The corporate sector is regulated by a lot of laws and regulations. The organizations do not have any control over the political and legal forces, and they have to adapt to meet the pressure of these forces. Plan change. It is both proactive and purposeful. It is an intentional, goal-oriented activity. The goals of plan change is it seeks to improve the ability of the organizations to adapt to changes on its environment, and it seeks to change employee behavior. Plan change is the process of preparing the entire organization for a new goals or a new direction. Example of this is a major automobile manufacturer spent several billion dollars to install state-of-the-art robotics. One area that received the new equipment was quality control, where sophisticated computers significantly improved the company's ability to find and correct defects. Because the new equipment dramatically changed the jobs in the quality control area, and because management anticipated considerable employee resistance to it, executives developed a program to help people become familiar with the change and deal with any anxieties they might be feeling. When organization is responsible for managing change activities? And the answer is change agents. These are the person who act as catalysts and assume the responsibility for managing change activities. And change agents are responsible for initiating and managing change within an organization. They see a future for the organization others have not identified, and they are able to motivate, invent, and implement this vision. These individuals can be manager or non-managers, either insiders or third parties. Many agent, many change agents fail to implement organizational change because organizational members resist change. Resistance to change. Our egos are fragile, and we often see change as threatening. Most reasons why employees resist change are: first, people generally find it convenient to continue doing something as they have always been doing. Making them learn something new is difficult. Another is changes always bring about alterations in a person's duties, powers, and influence. Hence, the people to whom such changes will affect negatively will always resist. Also, people who are stable on maintaining customs instead of taking risks and doing new things will always resist changes. This can happen either due to their insecurities or lack of creativity and will. There are ways to overcome resistance to change. These are communication, participation, building support and commitment, develop positive relationships, implementing changes fairly, manipulation and co-optation, selecting people who accept change, and coercion. Communication is more important than ever in times of change. Process of what need to be changed, how it need to be changed, and what success would look like could be communicated, then resistance can be avoided. Participation. It's difficult to resist a change decision in which employees are participated. Assuming participants have the expertise to make a meaningful contribution, their involvement can reduce resistance, obtain commitment, and increase the quality of the change decision. Number three, building support and commitment. Employees are also more accepting of changes when they are committed to the organization as a whole. So, firing up employees and emphasizing their commitment to the organization overall can help them emotionally commit to the change rather than resist to it. When employees' fear and anxiety are high, counseling and therapy, new skills training, or a short paid leave of absence may facilitate adjustment to change. Number four, develop positive relationships. People are more willing to accept changes if they trust the managers implementing them. Those who had a more positive relationship with their supervisors and who felt that the work environment supported development, employees must feel much more positive about the change process. Number five, implementing changes fairly. One way organization can minimize negative impact is to make sure change is implemented fairly. Procedural fairness is important when employees perceive outcome as negative. So it's crucial that employees see the reason for the change and perceive its implementation as consistent and fair. Manipulation and co-optation. Manipulation refers to covert influence attempts. twisting facts to make them more attractive, withholding information, and creating false rumors to get employees to accept change are all examples of manipulation. Cooptation, on the, on the other hand, combines manipulation and participation. It seeks to buy off the leaders of a resistance group by giving them a key role, seeking their advice not to find a better solution but to get their endorsement. Both manipulation and cooptation are relatively inexpensive ways to gain the support of adversaries, but they can backfire if the targets become aware they are being tricked or used. Once that's discovered, the change agent's credibility may drop to zero. Number 7, selecting people who accept change. Organizations can facilitate change by selecting people who are willing to accept. Individuals who are open to experience, take a positive attitude toward change, and willing to take risks, are flexible in their behavior, are prime candidates. Last, coercion. It is the application of direct threats or force on the employee who resists. Example of this includes threatening employees with transfer, block promotions, negative performance evaluations, and poor letters of recommendation. Levin's three-step model. Step 1, unfreezing the status quo. Step 2, movement to a desired end state. And step 3, refreezing the new change to make it permanent. Step 1, unfreezing. Before you before you can cook a meal that has been frozen, you need to defrost or thaw it out. The same can be said to change. Before a change can be implemented, it must go through the initial step of unfreezing. Because many people will naturally resist change. The goal during the unfreezing stage is to create an awareness of how the status quo or current level of acceptability is hindering the organization in some way. Old behaviors, ways of thinking, processes, people, and organizational structures must all be carefully examined to show employees how necessary a change is for the organization to create or maintain a competitive advantage in the marketplace. Communication is especially important during the unfreezing stage so that employees can become informed about the change, the logic behind it, and how it will benefit each employee. The idea is that the more we know about a change and the more we feel it is necessary and urgent, the more motivated we are to accept the change. Step 2, movement. Now that the people are unfrozen, they can begin to move. Levin recognized that change is a process where the organization must transition or move into this new state of being. This is when the change becomes real. It's also, consequently, the time that most people struggle with the new reality. During the movement step, people begin to learn the new behaviors, processes, and ways of thinking. The more prepared they are for this step, the easier it is to complete. For this reason, education, communication, support, and time are critical for employees as they become familiar with the change. Again, change is process that must be carefully planned and executed. Throughout this process, employees should be reminded of the reason for the change and how it will benefit them once fully implemented. Step 3, refreezing. Levins called the final stage of his change model freezing, but many refer to it as refreezing to symbolize the act of reinforcing, stabilizing, and solidifying the new state after the change. The changes must the changes made to organizational processes, goals, structure, offerings, or people are accepted and refrozen as the new norm or status quo. Lewin found the refreezing step to be especially important to ensure that people do not revert back to their old ways of thinking or doing prior to the implementation of the change.
Approaches to managing organizational change. First approach is Lewin's three-step model that already been discussed by Ms. Flores. So let's move on to second approach, which is Cutter's eight-step change model by Dr. John Cutter. This approach was cultivated from over 4 decades of Dr. Carter's observation of countless leaders and organizations as they were trying to transform or execute their strategies. He identified and extracted the success factors and combined them into a methodology, the award-winning 8-step process for leading change. So Carter began by listing common mistakes managers make when trying to initiate change. They may fail to create a sense of urgency about the need for change or a coalition for managing the change process, a vision for change and effectively communicate it or to anchor the changes into the organization's culture. They also may fail to remove obstacles that could impede the vision's achievement or provide short-term and achievable goals. And here it is. The first step is to create urgency. For change to happen, it helps if the whole company really wants it. Develop a sense of urgency around the need for change. This may help you spark the initial motivation to getting moving. This isn't simply a matter of showing people poor sales statistic or talking about increased competition. Open and honest and convincing dialogue about what's happening in the marketplace and with your competition. If many people start talking about the change you propose, the urgency can build and feed on itself. What you can do: first, identify potential threats and develop scenarios showing what could happen in the future. Second, examine opportunities that should be or could be exploited. Third, start honest discussion and give dynamic and convincing reason to get people talking and thinking. And lastly, request support from customer, outside stakeholders, and industry people to strengthen your argument. Let's move to second step. Second step is to form a powerful coalition. Convince people that change is necessary. This often takes strong leadership and visible support from key people within your organization. Managing change isn't enough. You have to lead it. You can find effective change leaders throughout your organization. They don't necessarily follow the traditional company hierarchy. To change, to lead change, you need to bring together a coalition or a team or influential people who comes from a variety of sources, including job title, status, expertise, and political importance. Once you form a change coalition, needs to work. Once formed, your change coalition needs to work as a team, continuing to build urgency and momentum around the need for change. Here are the lists that you can do. First, First, identify the true leaders in your organization. Second, ask for emotional commitment from these key people. Third, work on team building within your change coalition. And lastly, check your team for weak areas and ensure that you have a good mix of people that different departments and different levels within your company. So, next step is create a vision for change. When you first start thinking about change, there will probably be many great ideas and solutions floating around. Link, link this concept to an overall vision that people can grasp easily and remember. A clear vision can help everyone understand why you're asking them to do something. When people see for themselves what you're trying to achieve, then the directives they're given tend to make more sense. What you can do: first, determine the value that are central to the change. Second, develop a short summary that captures what you see as the future of your organization. Third, create a strategy to execute the vision. And lastly, ensure that your change coalition can describe the vision in 5 minutes or less. So let's move to fourth step, which is communicate the vision. What you do with your vision after you create it, it will determine your success. Your message will probably have strong competition from other day-to-day communications within the company. So you need to communicate it frequently and powerfully and embed it within everything that you do. Don't just call special meetings to communicate your vision. Instead, talk about it every chance you get. Use the vision daily to make decisions and solve problems. When you keep it fresh on everyone's mind, they will remember it and respond to it. It is also important to walk the talk, meaning what you do is far more important and believable than what you say. Demonstrate the kind of behavior that you want from others. So, what you can do is first talk often about your change vision. Address people concerns and anxieties openly and honestly. Apply your vision to all aspects of operations, from training to performance review. And lastly, lead by example, the most important of all. And the fifth, the fifth step is to remove obstacle. If you follow these steps and reach this point in the change process, you've been talking about your vision and building buy-in from all levels of the organization. Hopefully, your staff wants to get busy and achieve the benefits that you've been promoting. But is anyone resisting the change, and are there processes or structures that are getting in its way? Put in place the structure for change and continually check for barriers to it. Removing obstacle can empower the people you need to execute your vision, and it can help the change move forward. What you can do: first, identify or hire change leader whose main roles are to deliver the change. Second, look at your organizational structure, job descriptions, and performance and compensation system to ensure they're in line with your vision. Third, recognize and reward people for making change happen. And lastly, identify people who are resisting the change and help them to what's needed. Step 6 is to create short term wins. Nothing motivates more than success, right? Give your company a taste of victory in the change process. Within a short term frame, you will want to have some quick wins that your staff can see. Without this, critics and negative thinkers might hurt your progress. So, what you can do: first, look for surefire projects that you can implement without help from any strong critics of the change. Don't choose early targets that are expensive, and thoroughly analyze the potential pros and cons of your targets. So let's move to second to the last step, which is build on the change. So Cutter's argues that many change projects fail because victory is declared too early. Real change runs deep. Quick wins are only the beginning of what needs to be done and achieve long-term change. For example, is launching a launching one new product using a new system is great, but if you can launch 10 products, that means the new system is working. But to reach that 10th success, you need to keep looking for improvement. Each process provides an opportunity to build on what's went right and identify what you can improve. What you can do: first, after every wins, analyze what went right and what needs improving. Set goals to continue building on the momentum you achieve, and learn about Kaizen, the idea of continuous improvement. And lastly, keep ideas fresh from bringing in new change agents and leaders for the new coalition. And last step for Cutter's 8-step change model is to anchor the changes in corporate culture. Finally, to make this stick, it should become part of the core of your organization. Your corporate culture often determines what gets done, so the value behind your vision must show in day to day work. Make continuous effort to ensure that change is seen in every aspect of your organization. This will help give the change a solid place in your organization's culture. It is also important that your company leaders continue to support the change. This include existing staff and new leaders who are brought in. If you lose the support of these people, you might end up back where you started. So, for this not to happen, you need to do these things. First, talk about progress every change you get. Include the change ideals and values when hiring and training your staff. Publicly recognize key members of your original change coalition and make sure that the rest of the staff, new or old, remembers their contributions. And lastly, create plans to replace key leaders of change as they move on. This will help ensure as their legacy is not lost or forgotten. So let's move on to second approach, which is action research model by Kurt Lewin. So what is action research? So action research is a change process based on systematic location of data and collection of change action based on what the analyzed data indicate. Its value is providing a scientific methodology for managing plan change. It's just like the research that we do in our school for project purposes. Action research consists of four steps: diagnosis, analysis, feedback, and evaluation. So, first step, the change agent, often an outside consultant in action research, begins by gathering information about problems, concerns, and needed changes from members of the organization. The first step, which is diagnosis, is analog to the physician's research to find specifically what ails a patient. But in action research, the change agent asks questions, review records, and interviews employees actively listening to their concerns. Diagnosis is followed by analysis. What problems do people key in on? What patterns do these problems seem to take? The change agents synthesize this information into primary concerns, problem areas, and possible actions. Action research requires the people who will participate in a change program to help identify the problem and determine the solution. So let's move on to third step. Feedback requires sharing with employees what has been found from the first and second step. So as we observe, feedback is also part of Cutter's eighth step. We observe how important feedback is in the organization. So the employees, with the help of the change agent, develop action plans for bringing about needed change. Now, the action part of action research is set in motion. The employees and the change agent carry out the specific actions they have identified to correct the problems. So, the final step consists with the scientific underpinnings of action research is evaluation of the action plan's effectiveness using the initial data gathered as a benchmark. So evaluation is a benchmark in action research. So let's move on to the last approach, which is organizational development. Organizational development is a collection of change methods that try to improve organizational effectiveness and employee well-being. Organizational methods value human and organizational growth, collaborative and participative processes, and a spirit of inquiry. Contemporary organizational development borrows heavily from postmodern philosophy in placing heavy emphasis on the subject ways people see and make sense to their work environment. The change agent may take the lead in organizational development, but but there is strong emphasis and collaboration. So, what are some techniques or intervention for bringing about change? So, here are six. First, sensitivity training. So, it has variety of names like sensitivity training, laboratory training, encounter groups, entry groups, or training groups. But all this refer to an early method of changing behavior through unstructured group interaction. Current organizational interventions such as diversity training, executive coaches, and team building exercises are descendant of this early organizational development intervention technique. So, in classic sensitivity training, members were brought together in a free and open environment in which participants discuss themselves and their interactive processes loosely directly by a professional behavioral scientist who created the opportunity to express ideas, beliefs, and attitudes without taking any leadership role. The group was process-oriented, which means individual learned through observing and participating rather than being told. With all forms of organizational development, caution must be taken and unstructured group are not intimidating and damaging the work relationship. So let's move on to second step, which is survey feedback. So, one tool of assessing the attitudes of organizational members, identifying discrepancies among members' perception, and solving differences is the survey feedback approach. Everyone in an organization can participate in survey feedback, but of key importance is the organizational family, the manager of any given unit, and the employee who report directly to him or her. All usually complete a questionnaire about their perceptions and attitudes on a range of topics, including decision making, practices, communication effectiveness, coordination among units, and satisfaction with the organization, job peers, and immediate supervisors. Next is process consultation. So managers often sense their unit's performance can be improved but are unable to identify what to improve and how. The purpose of process consultation is for an outside consultant to assist a client, usually a manager, to perceive, understand, and act upon process event with which the manager must deal. This event might include workflow and informal relationship among unit members and formal communication channels. So next is team building. We noted throughout this text that organizations increasingly rely on teams to accomplish work tasks. Team building uses high interaction group activities to increase trust and openness among team members, improve coordinative efforts, and increase team performance. Here, we emphasize the intragroup level, meaning within organizational families, as well as committees, project teams, self-managed teams, and task groups. So the next one is intergroup development. A major concern a major concern in organizational development is dysfunctional conflict among groups. Intergroup development seek to change groups' attitudes, stereotypes, and perception about each other. Here, training sessions closely resemble diversity training, except rather than focusing on demographic differences, they focuses on differences among occupations, departments, or divisions within an organization. In organization, for example, the engineers saw the accounting department as composed of shy and conservative types, and the HR department as having a bunch of liberals more concerned that some protected group or people might get their feelings hurt than with a company making a profit. Such is such stereotypes can have an obvious negative impact on coordination effort among departments. So let's move on to the last step, which is appreciative inquiry. Most organizational development approaches are problem centered. They identify a problem or set of problems, then look for a solution, right? Appreciative inquiry instead accentuates the positive. Wait lang. Rather than looking for problems to fix, it seeks to identify the unique qualities and special strength of an organization, which member can build on to improve performance. That is appreciative inquiry as an organization's success rather than its problem. So it has four steps: discovery, appreciate the best of what is, dream, imagine what could be, design, determine what should be, and destiny with create what will be. So that's it for approaches to managing organizational change. The next topic is creating a culture for change that will be discussed by Mr. Lubuntal.
Good afternoon, everyone. So we have considered how organization can adopt change in our previous discussion, but it was more a proactive approach in how the organization can embrace change by transforming their culture. For today, I'm going to discuss the three approaches in creating a culture for change and addressing the issue of organizational change and stress in chapter 19. So first, let's paradox. In business, paradox refers to principles that seem to oppose each other at first glance but can be balanced to become compatible or complementary. A paradox is considered managed when the balance between the two opposing ideas is optimal. In a paradox situation, we are required to balance tensions across various courses of action because in creating decisions, we must consider some factors before making one. It is like sorting of ideas and selecting the final one. There is a constant process of finding a balancing point, a dynamic equilibrium, which means changing yet finely balanced among shifting priorities over time. From this perspective, there is no such thing as separate discipline of change management because all management is dealing with constant change and adaptation. So several key paradoxes have been identified after some specific concepts have begun to emerge from a growing body of research. So one of these several key paradoxes is learning. Learning is a paradox because it requires building on the past while rejecting it at the same time. During change, all actors and organizations face learning as they struggle to come to terms with new procedures and frames of reference. However, a true paradox of learning is more than simply the tensions experienced in moving between old and new, which may occur in any change process. Second is organizing. Organizing is a paradox because it calls for setting direction and leading while requiring empowerment and flexibility. It is a paradoxical because of the tensions between different organizational parts and tasks and the need for the organization to cohere as a collective system. Performing. Performing is a paradox between creating organization-wide goals to concentrate effort and recognizing the diverse goals of the stakeholders inside and outside the organization. It arises from complex organizational goals and differentiated structural units that require individuals to perform multiple and often inconsistent roles and tasks. And lastly, belonging is a paradox between establishing a sense of collective identity and acknowledging our desire to be recognized and accepted as unique individuals. This paradox is prevalent because different divisions embody different values, beliefs, and identities. They struggle to reconcile the values and beliefs of their work group with those of other groups and or other wider organizations. Actually, managers can learn few lessons in paradox theory. So a paradox theory states that the theory that the key paradox in management is that there is no final optimal status for organization, which means that when we say optimal, it is ideal and most desirable condition that the management should evaluate and balance it. But it says that there is no final optimal status for an organization, which means that organization weighs both sides of the situations. So the second approach is a culture for innovation. But before we proceed to the next topic, let me give you an example of one of the most innovative companies in 2020. Apple, along with Microsoft, Samsung, and Amazon, are considered the most innovative companies according to BCG's analysis of the 50 most innovative companies of 2020. Apple is best known as the maker of iPhone, iPad, and Apple Watch, but it is underappreciated for its work in designing the chips that power its devices and allow them to be ever more powerful. Apple became the world's most valuable company by being its preeminent maker of computing devices. From those you stick on a desk, like our laptops, to ones you strap to your wrist, which is the Apple Watch. And what sets them apart from other phone makers is that they make their own chips. So an iPhone packs a processor designed specifically optimized for Apple's operating system, apps, display, camera and touch sensor. So what could be the possible reason why Apple is a successful company? What is their secret to success? Probably because Apple do not just create products. Apple creates quality products and Apple is constantly evolving. That is why innovation has something to do with their success. So what exactly innovation is? We said earlier that change refers to making things different. An innovation is a specialized kind of change. It is the new idea applied to initiating or improving a product, process, or service. Just like what I've said earlier, Apple has its motto, think different. Apple has built a culture of innovation where their employees share a passion for creating consumer-friendly products. So now, I will be discussing the sources of innovation. These sources of innovation are structural variables. When we say structural variables, these are one potential source of innovation. The sources of innovation are organic structure, long tenure in management, slack resources, and inter-unit communication. So let's go first to organic structure. Organic structure positively influences innovation because they are lower in vertical differentiation, formalization, and centralization. Organic organizations facilitate the flexibility, adaptation, and cross-fertilization that make the adaptation of innovations easier. As you can see in the graph, there is a comparison between mechanistic structure and organic structure. Mechanistic structure is a centralized approach, while the organic structure is a decentralized approach. A set of formal procedures, functions, and processes are implemented throughout the organization under a mechanistic organizational structure. In this type of organization, employees tend to work separately on their own tasks, which are handed down through a chain of command, whereas an organic structure is a flat organizational that allows for horizontal communications and interactions and is more suited to creative organizations or businesses. It gives employees at all levels a chance to participate in business-related decision-making. It allows this type of organizational structure to be more flexible to change if needed. And the next one is long tenure in management. Managerial tenure provides the legitimacy and knowledge of how to accomplish tasks and obtain desired outcomes through creative methods. A tenured employee is someone who has company or organization for several years. So when we say tenure, it is the length of time of an employee has worked for a specific company. When you're a tenured employee, the company expects you more to perform well in the business. One of the positive effects of tenure is stability. It encourages employees to commit their own organization and their work. Also, is the expertise. Longer tenured employees typically have stronger expertise, along with broader and deeper knowledge in their field. The third one is slack resources. Having an abundance of resources allows an organization to afford to purchase or develop innovations, bear the most of instituting them, and absorb failures. For example, slack financial resources can facilitate investments in radical product innovations and protect organizations from potential depletion of resources if such efforts fail. And the last one is the inter-unit communication. These organizations are heavy users of committees, task forces, cross-functional teams, and other mechanisms that facilitate interaction across departmental lines. Innovative organizations tend to have similar cultures. They encourage experimentation and reward both successes and failures. They celebrate mistakes. Unfortunately, in too many organizations, people are rewarded for the absence of failures rather than for the presence of successes. So I'm going to discuss now the idea champions. Once a new idea has been developed, idea champions actively and enthusiastically promote it, build support, overcome resistance, and ensure it is implemented. Champions often have similar personality characteristics like having high self-confidence, persistence, energy, and a tendency to take risks. They usually display traits associated with transformational leadership. As we all know, transformational leadership inspires more people to achieve unexpected or remarkable results and energize others with their vision of innovation's potential and their strong personal conviction about their mission. Learning organization is an organization that has developed a continuous capacity to adopt and change, or an organization's skill at creating, acquiring, and transferring knowledge and modifying its behavior to reflect new knowledge and insights. Learning organization has characteristics. One of these characteristics is it holds a shared vision. There exists a shared vision that everyone agrees on. Next, it discards old ways of thinking and the standard routines they use for solving problems or doing their jobs. Next is, it views organization as a system of relationships. Members think all of the organizational processes, activities, functions, and interactions with the environment as part of a system of interrelationships. Also, one of the characteristics is that it communicates openly. People openly communicate with each other across vertical and horizontal boundaries without fear of criticism or punishment. Lastly, people sublimate personal self-interest and fragmented departmental interests to work together to achieve organization's shared vision. To summarize, people put aside their old ways of thinking, learn to be open with each other, understand how their organization really works, form a plan or a vision everyone can agree on, and lastly, work together to achieve that vision. So now, let's discuss the fundamental problems in traditional organization. The first one is fragmentation based on specialization. It creates walls and chimneys that separate different functions into independent and often warring fiefdoms. Second, an overemphasis on competition often undermines collaboration. Managers compete to show who is right, knows more, or is more persuasive. Divisions compete when they ought to cooperate and share knowledge. Team leaders often compete to show who the best manager is. And the third one is reactiveness misdirects management's attention to solving problems rather than creating. The problem solver tries to make something go away, while a creator tries to bring something new into being. An emphasis on reactiveness to problems pushes out innovation and continuous improvement and, in its place, encourages people to constantly run around putting out fires. So our next topic for today is managing learning. The question is, what can managers do to make their firms learning organizations? So the first suggestion is to establish a strategy. Management needs to make explicit its commitment to change, innovation, and continuous improvement. Managers should constantly seek to uncover new knowledge about their business, customers, and environment. Next suggestion is to redesign the organization's structure. The formal structure can be serious impediments to learning. Flattening the structure, eliminating or combining departments, and increasing the use of cross-functional teams reinforces interdependence and reduces boundaries. And lastly is to reshape the organization's culture. To become a learning organization, managers must demonstrate by their actions that taking risks and admitting failures are desirable. And management needs to encourage functional conflict. Functional conflict means a healthy, constructive disagreement between groups or individuals. It involves allowing employees to express different viewpoints and resolve differences in a healthy way that can encourage innovation and new ideas. We're going to discuss organizational change and stress. Here, we're going to identify the potential environmental, organizational, and personal sources of stress at work and the role of individual and cultural differences. Have you ever felt stressed because of workloads? Each one of us is dealing with stress. Like for example, a long traffic. It gives you major stress, especially if you're running out of time. In a workplace, stress is present too. So what stress is all about? A stress is an unpleasant psychological process that occurs in response to environmental pressure. It is also defined as a dynamic condition in which an individual is confronted with an opportunity, constraint, or demand related to what he or she desires and for which the outcome is perceived to be both uncertain and important. Although stress is typically discussed in a negative context, it is not necessarily bad in and of itself. It is also has a positive value. It is an opportunity, but it offers potential gain. Stress is associated with demands and resources. There are different types of stress. One of these is the challenge stressors. Challenge stressors are stress associated with workload, pressure to complete tasks, and time urgency. These are stressful demands that are perceived as opportunities for learning, growth, and achievement. It often triggers positive emotions such as pride and enthusiasm, whereas hindrance stressors are stress that keeps you from reaching your goals, like office politics, confusion over job responsibilities, and etc. These are stressful demands that are perceived as hindering progress toward personal accomplishments or goal attainment. It tends to trigger negative emotions such as anger and anxiety. This type of stress causes greater harm than the challenge stressors. Although research is just starting to accumulate, early evidence suggests challenge stressors produce less strain than hindrance stressors. As said earlier, stress is associated with demands and resources. So what are demands and resources? Demands are responsibilities, pressures, or obligations, and even uncertainties that individuals face in the workplace. Whereas resources are things within an individual's control that he or she can use to resolve the demands. So let us discuss what this demand resources model means. The model states that when demands are high and resources are low, stress and burnout increase. A high number of resources can offset the effects of high demands. Take note that adequate resources help reduce the stressful nature of demands. So my question is, what really causes stress? What are the different factors that cause stress? To answer that question, Mr. Longno will discuss further about stress.
And I'm going to present the last part of chapter 19. So let's proceed. Work life in an organization is a long process and it's characterized by different adaptation and changes. As a result, this organizational change may produce stress, which is one of the leading cause of burnouts and demotivation. In my report, I'm going to tackle and discuss the model of stress and its implication towards work in organization. So this figure shows a model of stress. In summary, potential sources are identified such as environmental factors, organizational factors, and personal factors, cultural differences, and individual differences, which resulted to the formation of stress that are experienced by many employees. Consequently, this will result to various symptoms that affects the physiological, psychological, and behavioral aspect of a person. To know and understand this deeply, let us discuss this one by one. Starting with potential sources. The first one, environmental factors are those that promote change, which will influence the external and internal environment. This includes the economic uncertainty that is characterized by the change of financial and economic condition, both the organization and the outside environment. For example, is GDP of a country. Next is the political uncertainty that is characterized by the change of political condition, such as the transition in position and power. An example of this is the change of CEO or no CEO. Lastly, technological change brought stress because this change needs a tremendous amount of adaptation and keeping up. For example, the upgrade from manual work to computer-related tasks. The next potential source are the organizational factors which affects the individual personally because of the organizational behavior environment. This includes task demands, which is defined as the working condition, nature of job, and workload. For example, an increase in the workload which is not usual might lead to stress. Next is the role demand. On the other hand, is the position and function played by an employee. For example, the expected result from an employee is not met. Lastly, interpersonal demand is the interaction and relationship of an employee with other employee. This includes group pressure and negative attitudes. Another potential source of stress are personal factors. This includes family problems, which is a stressor that may be brought from home to the organization. Also, economic problems prohibits the individual to function well because of the constraint and mismanagement of money. Individual differences, a collective stressor that is manifested by the variety of attitude and behavior in the workplace. This includes difference in perception, the mismatch of job-to-job description or experience, lack of lack of social support, and personality problem. Then this will result to further conflict, which will promote stress to an individual. Lastly, cultural differences is the variety of custom and norms that an employee possesses. These include practices, values and beliefs, tradition, and language. A misunderstanding and conflict between these factors will promote miscommunication and dissimilarity. Knowing these factors and its manifestation, this will create an experience stress which is accompanied by consequences. So, what are those consequences? There are three. So, first one is physiological symptoms. This concern with the mechanism and function of a living organism. An example of this is headache, illness, chronic health condition. Yun. Next is psychological symptoms. Ito naman sa mind. So, example of this, anxiety, lower emotional well-being, and lower job satisfaction. Lastly, is the behavioral symptoms are the mechanism created by individual. So, kung stress ka, feel mo bababa yung lower job performance mo. Kung stress ka rin, tatawarin kang pumasok ka na, tas higher turnovers. So, knowing these consequences, it is important for an employee to establish an effective stress management strategy, which will ensure positive work life and workspace. There are two ways of stress management. One, which is created or initiated by the person itself, known as individual approaches. And the other one is the organizational strategies to minimize stress, which is known as the organizational approaches. So, let's tackle individual approaches first. There are 4 techniques. First one is the physical exercise. This includes aerobics, walking, swimming, riding a bicycle, anything physical related. Ayan. Next is the relaxation techniques. This include meditation, hypnosis, and breathing. Parang finding yourself ulit, ganun. So, next one is social support network, friends, family, work colleagues. So, dito, pwede ka mag-vent out ng stress, ng loob sa mga kaibigan mo yun, families, work colleagues nga. Catch up na rin. Tapos, last one, yung time management techniques. Ito yung kadalasan natin ginagawa. Maintaining to-do list, scheduling activities, based on priorities, doing the hard tasks first, tapos blocking out distraction-free time to accomplish tasks. Next approach is the organizational approach. So, we have 8. So, yung una, selection and placement, give the company the ability to select employees which are suitable to a certain job through screening, interview, and such. So, yun, ginagawa ng company. Yun nga, screening, tas interview para malaman nila kung suitable ba sila sa job na yun. Pinipili na yung pinakamaganda na para kung ma-recruit ka man, maganda na kagad yung pasok. So, to further enhance that, nagbibigay din sila ng training, gives employee ability to adapt and provide self-efficiency. So, next is goal setting. Ito yung nabibigay ng motivation to give a clear path of what an individual is doing. So, kung alam mo yung motivation mo, siyempre, ay yung goal mo, siyempre, mas gaganahan kang magtrabaho. Tanggal rin stress, ganun. So next is organizational communication. Dito better organizational communication yung mas papagandahin pa, mas maganda yung communication ng lahat ng sa organization. So next is wellness program, parang ano rin to, yung physical exercises, ganun. So next is employee involvement. This includes parang according sa parang involvement yung mga employee, parang pwede sila magbigay ng suggestion, ganun, evaluation sa mga higher ups, ganun, para hindi nila feel na left out sila. So the seventh one is redesigning jobs, personal modification of job process until result is met. So dito pwedeng yan ng company na okay, dito ka, mas bagay ka dito, mas work ang efficiency dito. So last yung employee sabbatical. Ito yung tinatawag na paid leave. So yun, pampatanggal stress kasi ayun nga, leave ka na tapos may bayad pa. So ayun lang ang sa chapter 19. Thank you for listening.